Welcome to my talk on disentangling factors in the placement of manner adverbials in German, the effect of distributional similarity. First, why manner adverbials in German? Well, adverbials are optional elements. They come in a wide variety of usages, even for the very same elements, and those are associated with different syntactic positions. You can see that very nicely for English in 1a and b, rudely she left, versus she left rudely. The clausal reading is it was rude that she left. The manner reading, she left in a rude way, in a rude manner. The manner adverbials are usually close to the verbal predicate, and if we want to know where a specific class of adverbials is positioned, we need to focus on just one class. That's why we choose manner adverbials here. Why German manner adverbials? Mainly because there are in-depth theoretical and empirical studies on the placement of manner adverbials, and the traditional manipulations prove inconclusive. Furthermore, there are some theoretical constructs that are rather hard to operationalize. So what I will show you here is a reanalysis of 6 experiments from Gautza 2018, and including distributional similarity measures in the modeling will actually explain why the results so far have been inconclusive. So let's get started with the main problem. It is unclear whether the manner adverbials are positioned before or after the direct object. You see in the example in 2, in A, the manner adverbial schnell, quick follows the direct object adore, and in B it's the other way around. Furthermore, we know that there are a number of factors that play a role here. One is the object status, so is it definite or indefinite. One other factor is whether the adverb in question is plus or minus inchoative, more on that in a moment. And the final factor is integration, again more on that in a moment. First, plus minus inchoative. This is basically a factor that concerns speed adverbials that can have two different readings. One is the pure rate of speed reading, so to open a door quickly, in the sense that the opening itself proceeds at a high rate of speed, is this standard rate of speed reading. But we also have the inchoative reading, in English mainly to quickly open a door, where what actually happens is that we have an endpoint of a contextually given event, and then we specify that the time until the door is opened is only short. So we have these two options. What about this factor integration? It was originally introduced by Jacobs, who said that, well, two constituents can form a single referential unit that only afford one step of semantic processing, and direct object and adverbials can in principle both be integrated. In the theoretical literature, this is then used as a method to explain exceptions. However, it's really hard to quantify. We will here see integration simply as a special case of conceptual combination, assuming that only constituents that are tightly linked in the speaker's experience are candidates, and that the more tightly linked these constituents are, the more seamless the conceptual combination. That is, the examples in 4, to open a door or to run quickly, are good candidates for integration because doors are made for opening and running comes with a parameter for speed, whereas in 5, to open a tree, to run loudly, are not so good candidates because trees are not meant to be opened, and running does not come with a parameter for sound volume. We use distributional semantics to quantify the likelihood of integration, assuming with Günther et al. That they are general level models of semantic memory that encode the speaker's experience with specific context. In particular, we are going to be using the cosine similarity as a stand-in of the speaker's experience and expectation for two constituents. That is Our similarity measure here is a measure of the seamlessness of integration in the case of non-competing concepts, but perhaps rather a measure of competition for possibly competing concepts. That is, if you can have sing loudly and sing a song, both are good candidates for integration, but only one can be integrated. And we're going to be using three measures: the adverbial verb similarity, the object verb similarity, and the object adverbial similarity, with the last one hypothesized to be a measure of competition. Here's an overview of all the first 6 experiments in Gautzer 2018 that we remodeled, but here I'm just going to focus on the very first one, the Likert scales study, when the formal subordinate clause becomes clear if you look here at 2 examples from the material that also illustrate the factors that were manipulated. We have position, so the direct object either precedes or follows the adverbial. We have object status, so is the object definite or indefinite. And we have inchoative or non-inchoative adjectives that are used, where again only the plus inchoatives can receive these 2 readings, the rate of speed reading and the inchoative reading. We hypothesize that adverbial verb similarity and inchoative interact, and that only for the non-inchoatives there will be a constant influence of adverbial verb similarity, whereas for plus inchoatives the influence will be muted because they have these 2 different interpretations available. We hypothesize further that there is an interaction between object-verb similarity and object status. Again, following the lead in the literature, we assume that this factor is only relevant for indefinites, not for definites, which cannot be integrated in the first place. And finally, we assume that object adverbial similarity is a measure of competition, and thus again expect an interaction with the factor inchoative, based on the idea that only the plus inchoative items have these 2 options available, and maybe then the competition will not play such a great role. Here's the analysis of the first experience using just the original predictors, and most importantly for us is the finding for the non-inchoatives here, where you see that for the definites you see a very clear effect that they are judged better when the adverbial follows the direct object, and you see no effect whatsoever for the indefinites. If we now look at the final model with distributional predictors, we see something that is something of a very common pattern. We now have many interactions, and some of them are rather complicated. I'm first going to show you the 3-way interaction between inchoative and object verb and adverbial verb similarity, and then we're going to take a look at the interactions involving position. Okay, here's this first 3-way interaction. The most important point is that you can see here that for the red line, so the non-inchoative, the model is more certain, and what you can also see that there seems to be a competition between the adverbial verb similarity and the direct object verb similarity, so that when one of them is low, we get the maximum ratings if the other is high. So here we have low adverbial verb similarity but high object verb similarity, we get the highest rating, and it's the other way around in this panel, where we have the highest adverbial verb similarity and the lowest object verb similarity. When it comes to the interactions involving position, we get a rather complicated picture. I just want you to focus on this left hand side here, where we have the values for the non-inchoatives, and what you see is that now definites and indefinites actually move in lockstep, and the actual effect of positioning is modulated across the whole spectrum via the similarities. in comparison to the original hypothesis, we see that we find support for the first one. So there is an interaction between adverbial verb similarity and plus minus incoative. We saw this strong effect of adverbial verb similarity for minus incoative in post-object position, and we actually find just a small effect for the plus incoative. We don't find an interaction between object-verb similarity and object status. Instead, we saw that object-verb similarity seems to be in competition with adverbial verb similarity. And finally, we find support for the third hypothesis because object adverbial similarity and plus minus incoative participate in a three-way interaction with position. Overall, we find across all 6 models that adding distributional predictors leads to significantly better models that explain far more of the variance in the data. We also find that the distributional predictors always participate in interactions in all but one model with the lexical predictor plus minus incoative, in most of the models with the factor order, so before or after the direct object, and in one model directly with the factor object status, so definite or indefinite. The result is that we now see a very consistent behavior of plus minus incoative. We get very nuanced effects for object status and only weak support for a default position of manner adverbials. Why? Because actually these distributional measures modulate the results of the experience across the whole range of possibilities. What's missing is that we actually would want to have something where have some method to tease apart object adverbial similarity in terms of competition and complementation. So to capture the likelihood of co-occurrence on the one hand, but also the relative ordering. Ideas would be using purely collocation-based measures or vector composition-based models. Okay, thank you for listening to my talk.